Hey everybody, it's Cindy, and today I have a couple of things to do. First off, I have to apologize. I missed doing a thank you video for my 1,000 subscribers. I hit that a little earlier last month, and I really appreciate every one of you for sticking with me when my videos are slow or non-existent as they have been the last couple of months. I really do appreciate it. My life has gotten a little bit more hectic. Two of my children, who are both over the age of 18, have come home to roost for a while, and that makes things a little hectic because, you know, they're adults now, but at the same time they're back under mama's thumb, which is kind of an odd dichotomy for them and for me, to be honest, because I still want to tell them what to do and how to do things, and that's just not the way to go about things when they're grown-ups living at home. So that's going on, and just Christmas and holidays and everything, so I kind of got behind on videos, but I am catching back up, and in the meantime I hit 1,000 subscribers, which is super awesome. I never expected it, but I am really excited about it. So I want to say thank you to each and every one of you. I am also going to announce that on 5,000 subscribers, which is probably a ways off, but when I hit that, I'm going to do a fairly significant giveaway for appreciation for all the people who come and watch my videos every week or month or however often you do. So sincerely, thank you very much. So the next thing I'm going to do is do a thank you card using Altenew Whimsical Flowers stamp set, and my Gansai Tambi Watercolor, which is brand new to me. I'm just getting a chance to play with it. This will be the first project I make with it, but I'm really impressed so far, and I'll kind of give you a brief review of that so far. I'll do a more in-depth review later. So for this card, I use Ranger watercolor cardstock that is textured on one side, smooth on the other. I use the smooth side to stamp my images, and I use the textured side for the card front and did some splattering on it. So to stamp my images, I use archival ink by Ranger. It is acid-free, all that good stuff, permanent. It's also waterproof. So if you're going to be using watercolors, you want to use something that is waterproof. You don't want to use something like Memento because that is not waterproof. It works awesome for Copic coloring or other alcohol inks, but it's not good for watercoloring. So I stamped 3 of the stamps from the stamp set using this Ranger archival, and I just did it on the smooth side of the Ranger cardstock, the watercolor cardstock, and then we're going to set those aside so they can dry, because when you use the archival, it does take a little bit longer to dry than like the Memento, which is pretty much done instantly. Okay, so now that I have the flowers drying, I'm going to go ahead and work on the card front, and we're going to do that in just 3 really simple steps, which is to ink the stems down in archival ink, black, same as the outlines of the flowers, and then I'm going to go ahead and start watercoloring them. I'm using 2 different brushes. One is just a plain old toothbrush that I rescued when somebody was done with it and, you know, cleaned it all up with rubbing alcohol and all that good stuff. Not that it really matters. But the other one is a Winsor Newton Cotman watercolor brush. I think it's a number 8 round. I use it all the time. And I'm going to use the Kuretake Gansai Tambi watercolor. So far, and the only thing I've done with this, aside from this one card, is just make the color swatch on the inside of the front of the box. When you get the paints, they come with this plastic thing on the front. I recommend keeping it on there. I think it's a pretty good protector. So when you get the paints, you're going to notice that the pans are removable, and below each pans is a series of numbers. Those numbers correspond to the chart on the front. Since I can't read Japanese and most of this is written in Japanese, I don't know what the color names are, but they are all numbered, and that's all that really matters. It goes from a really nice, bright, vivid red up at the top down to some metallics and a kind of a pearl color down at the bottom, and everything in between. You have a really good selection. This is the 36 color set. When you get them, you might notice that some of your colors some of the pans seem to be bubbly and kind of rough. I checked 2 of those out, one that was really smooth and one that was bubbly like that, and I don't see any difference in the way the paint flows. I don't see anything different in the color. I think it's just a part of the process of pouring the paint. I don't think it's a really big deal. I have heard reviews of people who have said that their paint pans were cracked or that the pigments were actually cracked. I didn't have any of those, but even if I did, I don't think it would have been a problem. So far I'm really impressed. The colors are really vivid, they go down really well, and they're smooth. And you will be able to see that as I get started with coloring in the flowers and also doing some splattering. So I'm just using a piece of cardstock that has been laminated as my palette instead of getting out my big palette. And I'm just going to splatter down some water on that, brush some water down on there, and then add some pigment to it. I'm going to do a couple of different saturations of the color. So I'm going to do one that's little blob of it that's pretty heavily pigmented, and then one that's a little bit lighter. It's got a lot more water in, so that I have some range of values to work with. Values? Is that the right word? Some range of color. So I have some darker color for shading and some lighter color for the base. But first, I'm going to splatter down the color onto some of the cardstock that I'm going to be using as my card front, because I want to give that time to dry before I have to put the sentiment on the front. So I'm just going to, once I have loaded up my little makeshift palette with the color, I'm going to dip my toothbrush in it and just use my toothbrush to splatter some color onto the front. I'm going to do it from a fair distance away because I want the splatters to be fairly fine. I don't want them to be really thick or too large. I want a fairly fine, small mist on the background to add just a little bit of extra visual interest. So then once I've done that, I'm going to clean my paintbrush up, or my toothbrush up, and I'm going to get out my paintbrush, and I'm going to begin to color in the flowers. So the first thing that you do when you're watercoloring, or at the very least the first thing I do, is to decide whether you're going to work wet into wet or wet into dry. And in this case, I'm going to work wet into wet, which means I'm going to introduce some nice fresh clean water to each of the flowers, and then I'm just going to drop in a little bit of the color and let the water carry it around. And if you allow the water to do the work and to absorb the color into the paper, then you get really great watercolor effect. There's no other way to put it other than just to say it's a watercolor effect. So I did that for each of these flowers with the light color, and then I'm going to go back into each of them with the darker color, the more saturated color, and allow the water each time to just kind of spread it around. There's a couple of places where I'll go back in and kind of encourage the water and the color to go in a direction that I want it to, but for the most part, I just let the water and the color do whatever. This isn't meant to be perfect. It isn't meant to be precise or even anything like what would actually appear in nature, but it is, in a way, it is kind of what it would appear in nature because I let it happen organically. I let the water decide which way the color goes. And that is actually one of my favorite parts of watercoloring, or the kind of crafty, artsy stuff that I do, because it's very freeing and it's very liberating and it's not structured. I come from a family of visually artistic people. I'm a writer. I'm not terribly visually artistic, or I never have been. My mother was a really great painter, but she was an oil painter and some in acrylic later on. But tends to be very structured. This is the way you have to do it. Watercolor doesn't work that way. Watercolor is kind of a come as you are sort of art, which I absolutely love. And I understand there's a lot of technique that goes into watercoloring, but what I'm doing allows me to be artistic without focusing so much on the should haves and should have dones and the right way versus the wrong way versus, I don't have to worry about all that nonsense. It's about being creative and it's about expressing yourself in some way visually. So that's what I love about watercolor. So back to the card. Now that I have finished the card base and also the images, I need to put my sentiment onto my card. So to do my journaling, I decided to put it on my typewriter. So I have a relatively large collection of typewriters. Not huge. I'm not a complete hoarder yet. I have about 6 typewriters in plain view in my scrap room office area. This one that you see now happens to be one of my favorite. It is Smith Corona Roy Classic 12. It is just wide enough. The carriage is just wide enough that you can fit in an 11.5 inch wide piece of paper, which is perfect for scrapbooking because then you can do the typing for your journaling directly on the page, and that just adds a whole new level of interest to a scrapbook page. And this has definitely become my go-to and my favorite typewriter, which is a little strange, but we'll go with that. I'm a word nerd, so typewriters just go right along with that. So to do this, I just rolled the watercolor cardstock right into the typewriter, and I typed in caps, thank you, and I'm going to put it back in, and I'm going to do it 2 more times just to give it kind of a unique sentiment. So it's a simple thank you card. There's not a whole lot to it, but that little bit of kind of a retro font and way of putting the words onto the paper I thought was different and interesting, and I really liked it, so that's what I did. So the next step then is to fussy cut around the watercolor flowers now that they're dried and get them adhered down onto the card front. And then I decided I was going to put the whole thing onto a black card base, which I will make just out of plain cardstock here in a little while. But first I'm going to fussy cut all of the flowers with my tonic, Tim Holtz tonic scissors. So now I'm going to make my card base, and that is going to be made out of my Basil Basics Blackberry Swirl. It is my all-time favorite black cardstock. It's perfect weight, perfect texture. I just can't say enough about it. I need a piece that is 4 1/4 by 11 so that I can have a top folding 4 1/2 or 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card. And now I'm going to add the final details onto the front of my card before I adhere it down to my black card base. So I'm going to get out my black hemp teak twine, which is my favorite twine. It's not too heavy, it's not too soft, it's got some texture to it, but it's also not too bulky. So this is another one of my go-to products along with the Basil Basics Blackberry Swirl cardstock. It's just one of those things I always have on hand. So I tried here to tie a tiny knot in the front, but I had cut off just a little bit too little. So I'm just going to adhere it to the back instead with a little bit of ATG, and then you won't even notice that once I get it adhered down. To adhere this down and get it lined up, I have a new tool because that whole process of lining things up exactly to give yourself an 1/8 of an inch border on one side and 1/8 of an inch border on the other side, to me it's frustrating. It's not that I can't do it, because I can, but I always look at it and think, oh, that's not quite right. I need to do it this way, or I need to do it that way. I just can never get it right. So I found this product. It is by cheetahcrafts.com. It's a really great product. It's a layering ruler. And this is one of those times where it seems like sometimes the simplest tools are the ones you're going to use the most. So for this, it's really simple. You take the little L-shaped ruler and you line it up with your card base on one of the sets of red lines, so they all match up from the horizontal and vertical to form an L. You lay your card base along one of the lines that makes an L, whether you want a 1/8, a 1, I think it goes down to 1/8, 1/4, 1/2, whatever border you want around your card base, you line it up on that line, and then you just drop your card front into the L shape against the inside of the ruler. So even though I didn't do it on purpose, I actually ended up showing you how to do this twice on this video. I will do a more in-depth review of this product later. I really, really like it. It's going to make life a lot more simple when I'm doing things like scrapbook pages with mats that I have more than one, or when I am doing cards where I want a really thin border around the outside, but I want it to be perfect, because if it's not, it'll drive me insane. I love the aspect of watercoloring that means you don't have to be perfect, but there are some things that should be right, and borders are one of them. So now all I'm going to do is pop my flowers up on dimensionals across the front of the card. And that's just about it. I kept this card really simple, black, white, and one color scheme, because I wanted the flowers to really be the focal point. and then I wanted to try a different sentiment than I usually do. So I went with the typewriter, and I think I like the results. I like the twine at the bottom that gives it a little bit of a horizontal element and kind of acts to balance the flowers. If you found this video helpful or interesting, please give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for future videos. Thank you very much for watching, and again, thank you to all 1,168 of my subscribers. I really do appreciate you and all the time you spend watching my videos and making comments. So if you have any questions, please leave them down below the video, and I will get back with you as soon as possible. Have a great day.